Under oath to the Wexford County Circuit Court in the matter of the death of Raymond Allen Pelletier, occurring on or about the 14th of February, 1937, in the hardwood country north of the Manton Road terminus, Township Range 7, Wexford County, Michigan. Before the examiner reads any of that back to me, I want to say one thing for the record, and I want it written down exactly as I say it. The prints in the snow around that cabin were not made by a bear. They were not made by a wolf. They were not made by any animal I have seen in 30 years of working timber and trapline in the northern Lower Peninsula and the Upper Peninsula both, and I have seen all of them. Whatever made those prints was running on two legs. It stood somewhere between 8 and 9 feet tall by the evidence of where its breath fogged the chinking between the wall logs, and on the night of the 13th to 14th of February, it put its hands, or whatever serves it for hands, through 4 inches of solid pine wall plank, as though the wood were a thing it had already decided would not stop it. Raymond Pelletier went back for the horses. That is what I have to live with. He went back for the horses because I would not leave them, and because we spent 4 hours arguing about whether to go, and he is in the ground at St. Michael's in Cadillac, and I am sitting in this room talking to a court reporter about a thing that no one in this building is going to believe I saw. I am 53 years old. I have been trapping the Michigan North Country since 1907. First with my father out of Roscommon, then on my own line out of Manton. I have spent more winters alone in the back country than most men spend indoors, and I am not given to imagination. My first wife will tell you that. My second wife will tell you that without being asked. I will tell you what happened from the beginning, as clearly as I can remember it, though I want the examiner to know that certain parts of this account are difficult to put in order because there were stretches of those nights during which I was not entirely in possession of my reason, and I am not ashamed to say so. The sounds alone were enough for that. Raymond and I arrived at the base camp on the 7th of February, 1937. We had been running a winter line out of that camp for 4 seasons, the same territory, the same cabin, same trail network. The camp sat at the end of a 2-track that went north off the Manton Road about 11 miles, then another 1.5 miles through second-growth hardwood, before opening into a small clearing on the south face of a low ridge. The cabin itself was a trapping camp structure, nothing elaborate, built from pine logs in the early 20s by a man named August Kroll, who sold us the lease in 1933. The walls were 12-inch pine logs, with moss and river clay chinking, a stone fireplace on the north wall, 1 window on the east, no window on the south, a heavy plank door facing west. The south wall, which is the wall I will be describing later, was solid construction. August Kroll had built it to hold through Michigan winters, and for 14 years it had done exactly that. We brought 2 horses in, a bay gelding named Foster, who was Raymond's, and my own mare, an Appaloosa I called Sedge, short for Sedgwick, because she was stubborn the same way the old surveyor I used to run line for was stubborn. Both animals were useful in the North Country because they were cold weather conditioned, meaning they did not spook at ordinary woods noises, the way a barn-raised horse does. That detail matters. I will come back to it. We had 12 days of food, 2 weeks of trapping hardware, and the full cache set up. A pole cache about 40 yards north of the cabin, 8 feet off the ground, used for storing pelts and dressed meat away from predators. We put up the cache the morning we arrived, staked the perimeter, and settled in. The weather when we got there was overcast, temperature around 10 above Fahrenheit, which is normal for early February in that part of Wexford County. Snow was packed hard from the previous week's freeze, probably 8 inches of settled base, and the ground under that was frozen to a depth that made any track pressed into the snow's surface unusually well preserved. I noticed the prints on the morning of the 9th. Raymond was still asleep when I went out to check the firewood rack on the east side of the cabin. I had been out since first light running the nearest section of the trap line, a loop of maybe 4 miles through the hardwood drainage north of the ridge. I had come in with 3 mink and a beaver, not a spectacular morning, but a fair one, and I was in a reasonable frame of mind when I walked around the east corner of the cabin and saw what I saw at the base of the cache poles.
After my motorcycle crash, my leg was shattered in multiple places. 17 surgeries, infections. I couldn't walk for months. The insurance company tried to lowball me with a $25,000 offer. It felt hopeless, like I didn't matter. But I called George Sink injury lawyers. They didn't back down. They fought hard and got me over $7 million. They saw what I went through when the insurance company didn't care. If you're hurting, you don't have to fight alone. Call all nines.
Turn pressure into performance. Share files and get actionable insights with AI. All in one smarter, shared PDF space. Adobe Acrobat Studio.
The perimeter stakes we put up around the base of the cache were white birch stakes, sharpened and driven in a 6-foot circle, the idea being that any animal scrabbling at the base of the poles would snag the stakes and think better of trying to climb. Wolves will try the poles if they smell blood, and we had dressed venison up there. The stakes were scattered, not knocked aside the way a bear throws them, where the mark in the snow shows the animal swiped sideways. They had been pulled. 3 of them were lying outward in the snow with their points up, meaning something had gripped each one at the base and drawn it straight out of the frozen ground. I crouched and looked at those stake holes, and I could see the finger marks in the compressed snow around each one. Not paw marks, something that had closed around the stake and pulled. I told myself a man had come through the camp in the night, a trapper from another line, maybe, helping himself to a look at our cache. I was not comfortable with that explanation, but it was the most bearable one available, and I was not yet committed to the other possibilities. Then I walked the perimeter of the cache poles, and I found the loop, a single unbroken circuit, pressed into the snow and into the frozen earth beneath it, at 4 inches depth in places. 2-point track, bipedal stride. The front part of the foot was broad, with 5 toe impressions, and the toe impressions had depth at the front of each one that told me there were points there, not flat human toes, points that had dug in. The stride length was approximately 52 inches from heel print to heel print, which I measured by lying my arm along the distance, because my arm from shoulder to fingertip is 48 inches, and I could see the stride was longer. Whatever had made this track was large, and it had walked around the base of our cache in a complete circuit, once, with no deviation, before moving back toward the tree line to the north. I stood there for a while and looked at those tracks. I want to say something about what it is like to be a man who has spent 30 years in the North Woods reading track and come to a set of prints that do not resolve into anything you have a name for. There is a particular quality to that experience that I do not have words for in normal speech. It is not simply puzzlement. It is a kind of narrowing, like the world is getting smaller around you, while the thing in front of you gets larger, even though it is only a mark in the snow. You think, I know what made everything out here. I know what walked here and what flew here and what crawled here. And then you look at what is in front of you and you think, I do not know what made this. And the second thought comes fast behind the first. If I do not know what made this, then I do not know what else I do not know about what is out here with me. I went in and woke Raymond. Raymond Allen Pelletier was 29 years old in February of 1937. I had been running line with him for 2 seasons. He was from Traverse City originally, had come to the trade late, meaning he had done a few other things first, including 2 years studying at the Michigan College of Mining and Technology in Houghton before his money ran out, and he came north to the woods because the woods were hiring and everything else was not, this being the Depression still, and the fur market being one of the few things still generating any cash. He was intelligent, Raymond, more book-schooled than me, though I would not say more woods-schooled. He was a fair trapper, a reliable camp partner, and he had the useful quality of being calm when things went wrong in ordinary ways. He was also the kind of man who, when presented with something that did not fit his model of the world, worked very hard to make it fit, rather than admit it might not. He came out and looked at the tracks with me, and he said they were bare. I told him there was no bare track that printed like that. He said the cold had done something to the surface of the snow, made one track look like two. I told him to look at the stride length, and he said a large bear on uneven footing could step that wide. I did not argue long. I was 48 years old in 1937, and in 30 years of woods work I had learned that there are two kinds of moments when you are in the North Country. Moments when argument is useful, and moments when the only thing useful is to pay close attention and stay ready. This was the second kind. Raymond could call it a bear if that helped him. I was going to watch. We spent that day running the east section of the line, came back to camp around 4 in the afternoon. The light goes fast in February in northern Michigan, particularly under overcast, and by 4:30 it was full dark. We cooked on the fireplace, dried some things out, settled in. I will say that the evening was unremarkable until perhaps 9 o'clock, at which point I became aware of a sound from the north. Here is the thing about sound in the North Woods in February, and why what I heard that first night was different from ordinary woods noise. February in the Michigan hardwoods is among the quietest environments in the natural world. The songbirds are gone south. The insects are nothing. The squirrels and smaller rodents are largely dormant in deep cold. The larger animals, the deer, the elk in places, the coyotes, the wolves where they still ran, are moving but quietly, conserving heat, not burning calories on noise. What sound there is at night in that country in that season is sparse and specific. The creek ice settling, the occasional branch crack under snow load, wind through the high timber, and the voices of the animals that are still active, coyote mostly, and owl. You learn to know those sounds the same way you know your own heartbeat.
Day in the life of site manager. Today's priority, finding a field engineer. The job post isn't getting enough responses, so I upgrade to premium sponsored jobs on Indeed. Upgrading the post increased visibility, and we've got a few applications already. And now, back to my real job.
Sponsor your job on Indeed and get matched with quality candidates. Visit Indeed.com/hire now.
Prefer a GLP-1 pill to lose weight?
So, I never intended to be super skinny. I've always been a big guy. But because I noticed how unhealthy I felt when I was bigger, I just wanted to feel healthy. And then my friend told me about weight loss by Hims.
Hims is now offering the Wegovy pill,
an affordable GLP-1 that's FDA approved for weight loss. You can get started for just $39 a month with an active Hims membership. You take an online assessment, then connect with a licensed provider
Who determines if a prescription is right for you. Are you ready to see progress? Take the online consultation to get started.
They are the background. They do not alarm you. What I heard that night at 9 o'clock was not from that background. It was a rhythmic sound. That is the first thing I can say about it with confidence. It had cadence, repetition, a pulse. It came from the north, from the direction of the ridge above the tree line, and it came at intervals of roughly 2 seconds. A sound, a pause, a sound, a pause, that carried through the cabin walls without difficulty, because our cabin was not a sound-sealed structure, and never meant to be. It was a wet sound. That is the second thing. It had the quality of something breathing through moisture, the way a dog that has been running hard will breathe, with that open-mouth heaviness where you can hear the saliva in it. But it was low, not the high panting of an excited animal. A deep, controlled, rhythmic exhalation, each breath with a weight behind it that suggested a large chest. I sat up in my bunk and listened. It continued for perhaps 20 minutes from the tree line, consistent distance, consistent rhythm, and then it stopped, not gradually. Clean stop, as though a switch had been thrown. I lay back down. I did not sleep easily, but I did eventually sleep. In the morning, I told Raymond what I had heard. He told me it was a coyote carrying a kill, because a coyote will breathe heavily through a mouthful of prey, and the sound carries oddly at night through cold air. I told him I had heard coyotes carrying kills many times, and this was not that. He told me I was probably half asleep when I heard it, and my mind had made it stranger than it was. I did not argue. I want the examiner to note that on the morning of the 10th, before we left camp, I found additional tracks. These were not in the same location as the previous night's circuit. These were on the south side of the cabin, along the wall. I found 3 prints in the snow along the foundation, each one pressed as deep as those around the cache. The same bipedal stride, moving west to east. The longest of those prints measured 17 inches from heel to the furthest toe impression. I did not bring a ruler. I measured against my boot, which is a size 11, and my boot fit inside that print with 2 full inches of clearance on both sides. I did not tell Raymond about those prints immediately. I am not certain why. I think I knew that if I told him, we would have the argument we needed to have a day earlier than we were prepared to have it, and I was not yet willing to leave. We had 6 days of sets out. The catch to that point was worth something, and the debt we owed on the equipment and the lease was not a small number. I told myself one more look at the situation before I decided anything. I have told myself since that it was a bad decision. I have told myself since that every decision I made that delayed our departure cost us time we could not afford, and I stand by that assessment. But I want the record to show that the decision was motivated by economics and stubbornness, not by ignorance. I knew something was wrong. I chose to stay anyway. That is the part I carry. We ran the west section of the line on the 10th. The day was unremarkable except for the horses. Both Foster and Sedge were picketed on the east side of the cabin, in a lean-to we had extended from the east wall for exactly that purpose. Adequate shelter for the temperature, hay on the ground, water bucket that we broke ice on twice a day. The animals were accustomed to the camp from 3 previous seasons. They were steady animals, as I said. When we came back from the west line at around 3 in the afternoon, both horses were against the east wall of the lean-to, pressed into the corner. Sedge was shaking, which I had never seen her do in any weather or any circumstance in 7 years of owning her. Foster had his ears pinned flat and was showing his eyes in a way that meant he was very close to fighting the picket rope. I stood in the lean-to entrance for a moment and looked at them and felt a coldness in my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature. I went around the cabin perimeter. The snow along the south wall had been disturbed. I could see where something had stood close to the foundation, because there was a depression there that was not a footprint exactly, more like the compression you get when weight has been applied from above for a sustained period. The snow was packed in a rough oval at the base of the south wall, and above it, at a height of approximately 7 feet, I could see where the chinking between 2 of the pine log courses had been partially displaced. From the inside, or possibly from the outside, I could not determine the direction. I pressed my finger into the gap and felt cold air, so the seal was broken, but it had been a fair seal when we arrived. I went inside and looked at the interior face of that section of wall. There was nothing obvious from inside. The chinking was in place on the interior face. Whatever had applied pressure to that section had not been enough to push through from outside, or it had been probing from inside out. Either interpretation alarmed me. Raymond came in from unpacking the horses, and I told him everything. The prints along the south wall, the foundation compression, the chinking, the horses' behavior. I told him about the prints I had found that morning and had not mentioned. I told him what I thought, which was that something was circling our camp at night and investigating our structure during the day while we were away. I told him I wanted to leave. Raymond listened to all of it. He sat across the fire from me and he thought for a moment, and then he told me what the catch was worth and what we owed against it. He ran the numbers in a way that was accurate, because Raymond was good with numbers. He said we had 4 more days of good trapping if the weather held, and at the current catch rate, we would come close to breaking even on the season, and if we left now, we would be 3 seasons in the hole on the lease and the equipment note. And he asked me what I thought we should do about that. I did not have a clean answer. The money was real. The debt was real. The threat was something I could describe but not name. We stayed. That night, the 10th to 11th of February, I sat up in the bunk with the rifle across my knees and did not sleep. The fireplace was banked but not out.
If you got hit,
The cabin was maybe 45 degrees at the high end, colder toward the floor. Raymond slept. He had the easier conscience in that moment, having agreed with himself that the tracks were bare and the horses were spooked by coyote scent, and the whole situation was something a practical man from the northern Lower Peninsula could wait out. I did not share his comfort. I sat with the rifle and I listened. At approximately 11:30, the huffing started. Not from the tree line this time. I want the examiner to understand the difference in what I mean. The previous night, the first night, the sound had originated from the north, from the tree line at the ridge, which was roughly 100 yards from the cabin. On this second night, the sound was at the east wall of the cabin within the first 5 minutes. It had not built up gradually in the way a sound does when its source is approaching. It was simply there, close, as though whatever made it had crossed the 100 yards of open clearing between the tree line and the cabin in less time than it took me to register that I was hearing it. The rhythm was the same, 2-second intervals. The same wet, heavy quality, each breath with that running dog weight, that quality of effort and heat combined. But now it was 10 feet away at most, separated from me by 12-inch pine logs and whatever air gap existed in the chinking. I did not move. I want to be accurate about what my body did. I pulled my feet up from the edge of the bunk. I set my back against the wall, and I held the rifle across my chest, both hands, and I breathed as quietly as I could manage. The sound moved. That is what I want to communicate. It moved along the wall. East wall, southeast corner, south wall. It was not stationary. It was moving laterally at a pace I can only describe as deliberate, not fast, something taking its time, and it stayed at the same height throughout, which meant if I imagined its source on the outside of the wall, the source of the breathing was consistent with something standing upright at a height of approximately 8 to 8.5 feet. A standing bear, I told myself. A bear standing on its rear legs and pressing its nose to the chinking. I did not believe this explanation. I held it in my mind anyway, because it was the only container I had for what I was hearing. The sound continued for approximately 40 minutes, moving in a slow patrol along the south wall, doubling back, moving again. Then it stopped. Same clean cessation as the first night. No fading, no departure sound, no retreat through snow. I waited another hour before I moved. Then I went to the east window, which I had cleared of ice sheathing the previous day.